So when you're ready, close your eyes very gently. Settle yourselves comfortably for meditation by finding a sustainable position of poise for yourself, either sitting on the ground or in a straight back chair, with your spine elongated and yet relaxed. Allow your hands to rest palm upwards on your lap. And remember that this is time for you. Begin to connect with the sensation of your breath moving through your nostrils. And continue breathing in a slow, steady rhythm. You can imagine that as you breathe, you're taking in a delightful fragrance with each in-breath, like roses in full bloom, or a freshly brewed pot of coffee, or anything else that's pleasing to your senses. Notice how the breath expands your lungs, creating a subtle rising and falling movement. And let this breath nourish and soothe you. Now imagine a wave of peace and relaxation washing over you as you invite your muscles to begin softening. Relinquish and release any pent-up tension. Relax your entire face, your eyebrows, your eyelids, and the jaw. If there's any tension in your jaw area, you should avoid clenching your teeth together. And allow everything to completely relax and let go. Continue relaxing down through the neck, the throat, and your shoulders. Let your arms hang effortlessly, and let your hands feel soft and receptive. From there, relax your belly and your internal organs. Allow your hips and legs to soften. Allow a sense of relaxation to flow in. And allow that sense of relaxation to move through the lower, mid, and upper back. Feel that expansion in the back area. Allow that sense of relaxation to flow in and move into the abdomen area. Feel the sense of relaxation moving into all of your organs. And allow your legs to relax completely and let go. Relaxing down through your knees, to your calves, bringing your awareness to your ankles. And then gently bringing your awareness to your toes and your feet, allowing them to relax completely until your entire body is relaxed. You may feel as if your body is evaporating or melting away by bringing to mind the image of sand running through an hourglass, or a melting ice cube if it helps with the relaxation process. And from there, we turn our attention to relaxing our state of mind, letting go of any thoughts or distractions, anything in our past, or any plans for the future. Remaining in the present moment as we let all the other thoughts fade into the background, as we give ourselves the time to slow down and reconnect with our body and spirit. In our mind, we conjure up a sense of happiness and joy, perhaps casting our mind back to a time in our lives when we felt truly happy. Thinking more of the feeling it gave us than of the situation itself. And allowing that feeling to grow and spread within us until it fills every last molecule of our being, leaving no space within us for any other sort of thought. And from there, we turn our attention inward in the usual way, as if inside our body is just an empty space with no organs or tissues, muscles or bones, like a hollow space inside us. In our mind, we conjure up a feeling of the positive energy in our life, or a feeling of empty space within us, filled with happiness and joy. Within that empty space, we can imagine a bright, clear object such as a shining sun, a star, maybe a diamond or a full moon, or a feeling as if such an object is present inside us and floating slowly downwards until it comes to rest somewhere round about the very center of our body. If anything distracts our awareness away, we bring our attention back to this central point each time. It can also be a feeling that you have a picture inside you rather than a picture itself. If the picture or feeling disappears, we can conjure up a new one. We continue by checking in with the center, always remaining at ease. We should not press the feeling tight. The way we check in with the center is just by a soft nudge. Checking in with the center gently but firmly. But the way we touch the center should be really soft. And as we learn to wait for a while, the mind becomes used to that gentle connection with the center of the body. In the meantime, we continue to be slow in the way we approach the center with the mind, until such time that that slowness of mind can become stillness. Until such time as the peace energy we are gradually accumulating can pave the way to this stillness. If you find yourself becoming distracted from time to time, just acknowledge the activity of your mind and direct your attention back to your center. The reality of meditation in the beginning is that it's always going to be this gentle back and forth. So pay attention to this process of moving away from the center and coming back. As you do so, this movement of attention will leave you unfazed, allowing you to come back again and again, while cultivating a sense of patience and gentleness with yourself. You never have to push anything away. You never have to try to control or fix your thoughts. If at any time during the meditation you realize that the mind's wandered off or got caught up in thinking, it's no problem. That's just what it's used to doing. But we give it something different. We reintroduce the mind to the center by observing at the center. Every time you bring your awareness back to your center, it will allow you to dive deep to where the stillness and calm is, to where the beauty is. Remind yourself that there's nothing that you have to get right or to perfect. You simply remain curious and observe in the present moment. You're getting to know the center by observing its qualities. You're creating space between yourself and your thoughts, and tapping into that still and silent place. If the thoughts return, we do our best to ignore them. If ignoring the thoughts proves ineffective, we can make use of the traditional mantra instead. And we'll find that the more we say the mantra to ourselves, the more power we give that mantra, until the words start to feel like they become true. We feel these words resonating within our heart and within every cell, every fiber of our being, with every repetition of the mantra. Samma Arahang, Samma Arahang, Samma Arahang, over and over again, till the mind becomes still at the center, free of thought, nothing but our inner object to mark the place at the center. So we continue in this way for a few more moments in silence until we come to the appropriate time. We continue to keep our mind on track at the center of the body as continuously as we can for as long as we can without letting the mind wander anywhere else. And the nature of the meditation is that you're constantly guiding your mind back to the present moment and to your true nature, inward, beyond thought, as you gradually build a relationship with the center, as you get to know the center. And in return, the center is guiding you back to the present moment, to the calm and peace within. You become gradually more aware of the space or the silence, and you observe that. You may become aware of thoughts, sounds, or emotions, but you just observe them. In this way, the mind stays in touch with the center, gradually building up a familiarity with the center. In the meantime, we don't harbor complaints in the mind like, why is it taking so long? Or why don't I feel it that much? Because we have to accept that meditation proper takes a little time to kick in. Patience in meditation can sometimes mean sitting back and evaluating our meditation less frequently or less critically, allowing us to appreciate our progress. Change can sometimes be slow, like watching the grass grow. And being impatient can be especially problematic when we're coping with a chronic or a severe problem. If we can assume that with mindfulness practice, some kind of improvement in life condition will occur over time, albeit slowly, then it's a good strategy to spend less time continually asking yourself, how is my meditation going? Do I feel better now than I did a moment ago? Doing this less frees up the mind to enjoy our meditation in the present moment. And it helps to avert discouragement and despair that can arise when we insist on seeing spectacular changes all the time. When looking for metaphors for patience, sometimes we can learn a lot from the ocean, because the ocean will spend aeons breaking big rocks into sand. It makes the same tidal movements day by day without complaint. It touches the land with surf, wave upon wave, inexorable and elemental. In a similar way, as our attention wanders away from the center, as it inevitably will, we bring the mind back to the interminable nature of the ocean waves lapping at the shore. With the same unfailing gentleness and kindness, usher our attention back to the center. There's no shame in having the mind wander. It's just a natural feature of the mind that it can happen to everyone. We wander as we simply check in again with the center, or breathe the awareness back to the center. It's no big deal. There's no real trouble. There's no reason to rush, to be frustrated or even disappointed. Eventually, a glimpse of inner peace will come, will grow, little by little. And in the meantime, we keep our mind free of expectations. If we're distracted by thoughts, we acknowledge them without fighting back. They'll go away by themselves if we don't take notice of them or starve them of importance, until the mind becomes emptier little by little. In the meantime, the weight already helps us to feel a little more peaceful. In this way, we continue to remain inside the center for a few moments more. In the meantime, we let the peaceful feeling and energy cleanse this empty mind. If the energy can pass on to the body, then we let the body absorb the same clean, pure energy, cleansing ourselves, enjoying the lightness of body, with an understanding that peace energy is pervading the whole of our body and mind. Whatever the experience, if the mind wavers, we are able just to accept it, without any comment, without judgment, with no mental commentary, no sense of right and wrong. The waiting mind is just neutral. The more neutral we are, the more robust the quality of the energy will become. To be neutral starts with the right attitude that waiting is the simplest way to further meditation at any level. Which is why waiting is so precious for the mind. Without the waiting mind, then nobody can be successful in meditation. It's said either that all things or good things come to those who wait. Since patience allows us to remain steadfast in the face of provocation, annoyance, misfortune, or pain, without complaint, without loss of temper, without irritation or any other adverse reaction. It can help us overcome restlessness or annoyance when confronted with delays, by helping us to persevere even when we seem to be a slow learner in our meditation. Another distraction that might arise are feelings of impatience, restlessness, or even boredom. Typically, this happens when the mind projects itself into the future, or tries to elaborate the practice into something more than this simple observation at the center. You can acknowledge these distractions without buying into their stories. According to the ancient wisdom of the Bhaddekarata Sutta, we shouldn't chase after the past or place expectations on the future, but we should remain with whatever quality is present that we see right here and right now. So we continue to remain inside the center in this way for a few moments longer in silence. So we continue to observe as the peace energy inside us merges more and more. If it happens for the first time, we just accept. We won't allow the questioning mind to get the upper hand. We just accept it with the radiation of the peace energy expanding from the center, with or without expectation. The energy will radiate forth no matter what, because this is the nature of the energy. There's no reason to ask why. We simply welcome or accept the expansion of that peace energy. As the body starts to feel emptier, lighter, or may disappear completely, we accept this too, almost as if the energy is replacing the weight of the body. We allow the energy to expand, to grow, to radiate outwards, filled completely with that peace energy. For the last part of our meditation, we can remain deep in the embrace of such a strong feeling of deep peace. We let more of that peace energy expand until the entire feeling, not only inside the body but beyond the body, grows bigger, wider. This may happen automatically on some meditations, and at other times not. But whatever we experience, we just feel aware that the peace energy has the potential to radiate further, making the body structure feel weightless, as thin as threads of gossamer or chiffon gauze, so light that it is transparent. The energy inside spreads throughout our being, as if there is a soft merging of inside and out. We remain aware of such a gentle process of merging. As we check in with the center, which remains full of peace energy. We remain at the center of deep peace within ourselves, basking in the flow of that radiant consciousness bathed in golden light. We retain that feeling of peace and wonder for a few more moments now in silence until we come to the appropriate time. Sappha Putthanupavenaha Sappha Dhammanupavenaha Sappha Sanghanupavenaha Sattha Soti Bhavantu Te. So if you'd like to come to the end of your meditation for this evening, you can gradually open your eyes again. If you feel at all uncomfortable, then slowly try changing to a more comfortable position before slowly finishing your practice. And I think at this point, there is a short break, and then we can pick up with our subject matter for tonight, which concerns enlightened living.
Contact at about 8, 5 minutes past 8. Or 8 sharp.
อุ่นก็ที So I think it is an water break. Yes. Hi, Francis. Surviving, thank you. So you look like you haven't actually done anything with your break. I guess it's probably more hygienic that way. But today I'd like to make a start on a series of talks entitled Enlightened Living. It is based on one teaching in Buddhism given by the Buddha called the Mangala Sutta. And it consists of a sort of sequence of practices or teachings, starting with the simple and leading to the more esoteric. So anywhere you jump onto the staircase, then it will lead you upwards. And generally, this sort of teachings, they lead on and on. Usually it's about a year's worth of talks. And what I've agreed with the temple, seeing as I'm around, is that I'll probably give a teaching every week. But one week it'll be on a Thursday, and the next week it'll be on a Tuesday. So on Tuesdays, I might have to look and see just how receptive the newcomers are to this sort of stuff. But what I'll do is, if there are 38 teachings, then I'll teach half each time. So meditation and half of a teaching. Yeah. And we'll gradually move through from the simple to the more challenging ones. But today is a sort of orientation. So really we're talking about spiritual knowledge. And you might be familiar with the idea that knowledge can change a person. Generally, it's what we'd expect from becoming educated, is that if you are more educated through the knowledge that you get in your school or whatever, then somehow you change your potential as a person to go out and seek success in life. So we are used to this idea that knowledge can change a person. But what we are talking about here is not just a person becoming more equipped to earn their living or a better salary, but we're talking about how they can transform their destiny to one that is brighter, not just in a financial way, but in terms of fulfillment on all levels. So we're talking about spiritual knowledge. And it's not that this is not taught in school, although it is getting rarer. If you can think back to your own school days, you may have remembered something called values education. No. It's something that different countries place different amounts of emphasis upon. And some countries are quite prescriptive, especially if they have a sort of national religion. Whereas in other countries, they might back away from this subject and let parents teach what they want to their children. And the school doesn't have a part in that. But the UK is somewhere in the middle. And they tend to change the name of it according to the way the wind's blowing at the time politically. Often it's a part of religious education. In the old days, they used to call it social, moral, and cultural development. So it doesn't sound familiar? RE, yeah, RE, yeah. Everything, RE is a sort of ragbag for everything that doesn't fit in other subjects, generally speaking. And now they're trying to do away with that as well. But yeah, I've had an interest in RE for some time, and they tend to, sometimes they base it on religions, so it's a comparative thing. Other times they take out themes from different religions and see what's the same and what's different. Usually what's the same, because that treads on less toes. But I once argued that if a person doesn't have any part of that outlook which they feel they belong to, then everything just becomes relativism. So everything is just like, oh, well, it just depends on what you like, unless you feel at home with some part of it. There needs to be something as a point of personal reference for any of it to make any sort of sense to a person. Now, you can study many religions, but you need to have a sort of point of reference for yourself for it to make any sense at all. Otherwise, it's just like, oh, well, it's just exotic to really be meaningful. So you need to have some sense of belonging to something for it to really sort of to hit home and to be of some use to you in your life. So how do you get that? If you have a place where you feel you belong, then learning about other or different points of view or sort of moral philosophy or ethics or anything like that, you can gradually move from where you are to things that are gradually more unfamiliar to you. And that's how you learn. And with this scheme known as enlightened living, it's almost like you're moving incrementally from things which are very basic, which anyone can relate to things which gradually move you in the direction of something more esoteric. So they're not hidden from you, but they make no sense to you unless you're building on some sort of foundation of understanding which you already have. Yeah. So in a way, enlightened living continues where other sorts of studies of morality and ethics and culture leave off. But the important thing is the sense of responsibility or belonging or investment to a certain extent in those values which are learned about. So it's particularly important because whenever there are problems that occur because of people, then generally it's because of people having some sort of blind spot in their sense of right and wrong. I don't just mean like right or wrong practices, but in terms of people cutting corners or people not doing the right thing, but doing the easy thing instead. It comes down to their sense of moral caliber or moral fiber. And you could say that if a person is lacking in that department, then it's because they haven't become properly educated about the importance of why it would have been better to do the right thing instead of the easy thing. So you could blame any of these problems on their lack of education in terms of these ethical aspects. If they're not getting it from school, then where can they get it from? And these days, I think even schools maybe hesitate to even mention these things in case the parents complain. But especially when it comes to the knowledge they get in other places in school and how to apply those in an ethical way, because any knowledge, any power you have can be used for good or for harm. And often there's not much clarity about where you would draw the line in those things. So a lot is taught, but not much is taught about how those can be put to some sort of peaceful application. And the higher one goes in education, the narrower one's knowledge becomes. The more disconnected you become from maybe the ethical side of what your specialism is. So this means that often the really terrible things that you see on the news every night, they are perpetrated by people who are often highly educated. And usually their victims are the people who lack education. So it's ironic that we spend so long in school learning and having this potential to learn like really useful things, but the things we get instead are things that add to the problems in the world often. So some of the terminology which I'll talk about today to start with, there are some sort of words that might be unfamiliar to you. Firstly, something known as inner peace education. Secondly, the path of progress, blessings, the Mangala Sutta, enlightened living, and last but not least, the manual of peace. So I think I better define these because otherwise you probably think, hey, didn't he just mention that with a different word? So inner peace, or IPE for short, in the context of Buddhism is sort of values education, and it's intended to help students to know themselves better and to manage their life more towards fulfillment. The term path of progress is a sort of campaign that was used in Thailand to integrate IPE into the school curriculum. The word blessing is the direct translation of the word mangala, which doesn't mean to mangle things up. It means, it comes from the Pali scriptural language, and it means a blessing. And some people think a blessing must be an object or an action, but as we look more closely at these materials, we find that it can be anything that is a cause of prosperity or progress or happiness in life. And they're supposed to bring about abundance or wisdom, also virtues and progress, not just in the present time, but in your future as well. The unique thing about this sort of approach to ethics is that unlike a sort of blame culture where bad things happen and you just look for someone to blame it on, this is completely the other way around, is in that if something comes into being, then it predicts that the future is going to be brighter. So by bringing these things into being, it's like you are putting down a deposit for a better future. So this is the sort of logic of these blessings. The Mangala Sutta, so this is where it's derived from in the Buddhist scriptures. If you look in the Theravada scriptures, so Sri Lanka, Thailand, Burma, traditions of Buddhism, then you can find it in the Khuddaka Pada or the Sutta Nipata. But it's also found in the Tibetan scriptures called the Kangyur. The way the Buddha outlined it was in terms of 38 things which he called blessings. And he divided them up into 10 groupings, which are almost like steps on a staircase. And the details of how to practice these 38 are enlarged or expanded or interpreted in different ways by different teachers in different traditions. Enlightened Living is the name for this series, and it's almost like a lifestyle informed by a knowledge of the 38 blessings. Sometimes they're called the blessings of life. And the Manual of Peace is like an English language textbook detailing how to practice those 38. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about inner peace education, which is sort of education and spiritual knowledge for peace. And it starts by imparting awareness to a person about the consequences of their own actions. Because every action, whether good or bad, has an impact not just on the person who does it, but also on the people around them. So if you are a spiritually educated person, then you cannot at the same time be an irresponsible person. It's not just about a theoretical knowledge about actions. You have to, the outcome of the learning would be that you would become a more responsible person as a result of that education. So advocate certain actions by a student, and the education will be concerned with how different actions bring about different levels of peacefulness. It's different to the approach of some religions that you would expect, where you'd expect to sign up to a package of maybe unchosen obligations. Here, the inner peace education is about giving people a way to sort of work out for themselves the peaceful or unpeaceful consequences of different actions that one might choose. So it's about giving a way of reasoning rather than a set of prescriptions. Yeah. So it's not a sort of dogma. And this is why it's rather more difficult to make it into an educational system than simply saying, memorize this and this you can do and that you can't do. It relies on lived experience more than a belief or faith. And it allows a person to determine their own approach to their spiritual knowledge in a way that can provide a firm foundation for peace, for any other sort of knowledge that they might learn about in terms of secular education. Each person has a hand in their own education, so you could say it's self-education, and it's also applied. It doesn't necessarily have to take place in a classroom. It can be taught as part of life. However, in order to really to get to grips with this sort of education, it requires continuity and perseverance and quite a lot of goodwill. And often these sort of qualities are eroded away in more materially focused education, often with a curriculum that is already full, and they want to put yet more things in it, then all the sort of STEM subjects tend to displace everything else. This is what's happening more and more, especially in this country. That's why even things like religious education are disappearing. But inner peace education has tried to help bridge the divisions that tend to come out as a result of race or nationality or religious differences, because they explore shared values. And although it comes originally from the Buddhist-led values, which you can see from the pictures here in Thailand, the things it talks about are basically human qualities. People who learn about it will tend to reason through their decisions instead of being temperamental. And they tend to have more of a sense of responsibility coming out of their education towards themselves, towards their nearest and dearest, and towards the economy, society, and environment. So they'd have a clearer understanding of themselves and a clearer understanding of purpose in life. The really ambitious aspect of IPE is that even the people who teach it need to have some sort of first-hand experience and understanding themselves in order to be able to teach it. So they need to be able to exemplify it. This is quite a big ask for teachers who are on board with it. Nonetheless, in Thailand, which is where those pictures are from, there's been about 20 million children or adults who have been through this system. It's known as the Path of Progress, and it's been taking place in Thailand for about 40 years now. And it's based on these 38 blessings, and it's taught in different ways, right the way from kindergarten up through colleges, even to police colleges, military colleges. They all have to learn about this, or they can choose to. And the participants are motivated by a chance to sort of get sort of national recognition. So where can we learn about these sort of things? I've been involved with a book which brings together all these 38 blessings in sort of what you would call in the sort of detailed explanation. And they are based on 80 hours of teaching by our vice abbot in Thailand, which were called Mongkol Chivit. They were taught in about the 1970s, mostly to students. And the nice thing about his teaching was that it gave a lot of examples, many derived from the scriptures. So the scriptures are just like a huge bookcase of books. If you've ever seen the Buddhist scriptures, it's not a book, it's like a whole bookcase full of books. And the problem with that is you don't know where to start. But if you've got a sort of structure like these 38 blessings, which you know are in order of sort of difficulty, and you've got examples to go with each of those, then you can start simple, and you've got all the sort of examples laid out for you, which makes it very easy to get to the point about practice in a way that you can relate to. A second thing which I used when I was compiling these books was the shorter version, which is used for the school children, which is like much thinner. Doesn't have any examples, but it's more structured. And from those sources, I started to teach in Western countries. And it turns out that there are a few places where it's quite hard to get Westerners to understand Thai reasoning on certain sorts of ethics. Some things which Thai people might understand in just a sentence of explanation might take much more explanation to make sense at all to a Westerner. And some of the things which I would include in that, especially include things like respect and gratitude, and things like not drinking alcohol, which most people find quite disappointing if they are a Westerner. It sounds like very strict or very austere. So a lot of extra explanation is needed in those places. So it's not that you can just take a book or a set of lectures and translate them. You have to basically reinterpret and re-explain the whole thing for it to make sense at all in a new culture, a culture where people don't have that foundation of basic knowledge. A lot of the Thai things are quite rhetorical in their arguments, like, oh, well, everyone knows this, and like, you should do it too. And that is not convincing for a Westerner. And often they rely quite a lot on, if you do this, then you'll go to heaven, which is fine. But and again, it doesn't work very well in a Western context. So I had to reverse engineer a lot of the explanations. And what I've done in many places is to talk instead about the flip side of what happens when a certain virtue is neglected in any particular society and the damage that comes because of that. So it's like re-explaining the whole thing. Although the conclusion may be the same, but how you reach the conclusion might be very different in a Western context. Also, I had to go back and look at quite a lot of the scriptural references, because one thing we often get accused of is like just making it up as we go along without any scriptural basis. So they think, oh, you have deviated from the traditional teachings here. And what I've tried to do is to show that actually all the things talked about are actually in the scriptures already. It's just that they may not be particularly well known, because a lot of Western teachers tend to focus on rather different aspects of the scriptures, maybe not such practical ones. Some of the illustrative examples I've replaced with Western examples where possible, where it's a clearer sort of moral to the story. So yes, these books, they're here if you ever are interested in them. And they are the sort of, if you miss out on any particular talk, then you can go and read up on it from those books instead. In recent years, it has been admitted from the person or the monk who taught this originally that where people don't get these 38 blessings, they need to backtrack. And there's a set of teachings called universal goodness, 5 of these, which you may be familiar with. 5 universal goodnesses: cleanliness, orderliness, politeness, punctuality, and meditating. Have you heard of these at all? And the teacher who originally taught these 80 hours of 38 blessings said that if you don't get those, then you should backtrack and make sure that you are clean and orderly and on time and polite and meditate. Otherwise, the rest won't make sense to you. So it's like there's a course of things to train yourself in before these 38 blessings will make sense. So in Thailand, how has this been helpful, this inner peace education? It has helped schools quite a lot to inspire their students to take a moral perspective or an ethical perspective on their other studies. I'll give an example quickly. There's an example of an elementary school, so primary school, where students adapted the 38 blessings to other aspects of their curriculum. They worked together by having assemblies on these topics, and often the students were so motivated by the things they learned about that they broke down into little groups to see how they could improve on those 38 for themselves. So to sort of evaluate themselves in terms of those 38 blessings. So this came from the students. Even the little kids were interested, but they couldn't manage the assemblies, so they did it with their sort of homeroom teacher, learning about the 38 blessings. Some of the kids were quite good academically. There's even one who won one of these mathematics Olympiads. He won a medal in that, but he said what was more important to him was knowing how to apply what he had learned in an ethical way. So they thought that that was a sign that they were on the right track, that people weren't just interested in academic knowledge to the expense of all other things. They were also interested in the ethical side to that. And in a secondary school, it was the same sort of thing, but it was the teachers who got quite interested because they had to know what they were talking about first before they could teach it to their kids, especially secondary school kids. And a lot of them got big benefits out of this as well. A really sort of dramatic story was one of the secondary school kids who got himself in trouble. There's a guy called Visarut Komkeo, and he was at a school in Nakhon Pathom. And when he was young, he was brought up by his mother, and he had a good relationship with his mother, and she always taught him to be a good person. But at a certain point in his secondary education, he started to get in trouble and he had a falling out with his teacher, and he dropped out of secondary school. And he, instead of going home and helping his mother, he started to go out every night, and then eventually he was introduced to drugs. And it was, I don't know what sort of drugs in pill form, but he got addicted to these, and he ended up selling them in order to support his own addiction. At which point he got caught by the police. He put in juvenile detention. His mother bailed him out. And at the time, he asked his mother, "Oh, why did you do this for me?" And his mother had tears in her eyes, and she didn't say too much, but she said, whatever you do, I have to forgive you. I have to help you. It's like, I'm not going to give up on you. And that really sort of made him stop and think about not just how he is ruining his own life, but he was also ruining his mother's life as well. So part of the conditions for his probation was that he had to go back to school. But even though he went back to school, he had these two voices in his head the whole time. One of them saying you ought to do the right thing. The other one saying you ought to be selling drugs to your friends. There's opportunity here. It's like two voices in his head. And he was on the point of relapsing. And then his teacher came out with this book about 38 blessings and saying, do you want to join in and join this competition, this quiz contest for the 38 blessings? So reluctantly, he joined in with this, and he realized that the book wasn't just academic knowledge, but it was actually speaking straight to the better voice inside himself. And he found himself fascinated by this to the point that it pulled him back from the edge of relapse. And he started to see his mother's devotion to him in a different way. He started to be more outspoken in the good things he did at school. And he started to be accepted back into the community of fellow students without that suspicion anymore, to the point that he started to, be able to inspire other fellow students as well to learn about this sort of knowledge. So he said that was really the turning point in his own sort of downfall, and then sort of being able to snap out of that and go back to leading a successful, normal life again, just having that knowledge. So that was really a dramatic example of how knowledge can change a person's life. So today, I think I will probably not go into too much more detail, except to say that there were a few years when some of these teachings actually came out more in English. I think it's going back to probably 2005 or so. They started to have exams also in English. And I think there are some prizes around here somewhere in little exhibition cases of prizes that were won by people even locally here who had a knowledge of 38 blessings. After that, they moved on to other books. I think Warm-Hearted Family was one you might have heard of. Warm-Hearted Family? No? Well, these are sort of things which they once they'd done one book, then they started having a different book every year. And most recently, I think it's taken off in schools with students who speak English in places like Sri Lanka and Bangladesh and Nepal, Mongolia. Yes, it's become more popular there, less amongst the likes of ourselves. But that was called the World Peg Activity. Yeah, they won a few prizes here before it moved back into schools in Asia again. But yes, that has been one of the things, good things that has come out of having some of these materials in English. Next time I see you, I'll talk a little bit more about how the philosophy behind how these 38 blessings form a very substantial system for guiding people's ethical choices. Yeah. So I keep it in small doses. Yeah. And I'll talk about that on next Tuesday.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Now it is time for a question. Okay. So we have already meditated. That's about 45 minutes. And you got some technique. You might use any objects. Then, and if you might have inner experience for the meditation session, if you have any question, please feel free to ask our teaching monk. For the Dhamma talk, if you would like Prajaan to clarify more about how to understand yourself and how to understand purpose of life and the benefit of all of this, please feel free to do so now. Yes.
I just wondered if you had any tips on forgiveness, whether it's forgiving somebody else or forgiving yourself.
Forgiveness is related to the qualities of compassion. So anything you can find in Buddhist teachings concerning compassion, generally you can adapt that to relate to forgiveness. It's like just a different perspective on compassion. And forgiveness, of course, can be when someone else has wronged you and you are having to somehow get past that. It can sometimes be yourself finding fault with yourself and just beating yourself up about that. And it can also be when you've done something wrong to another person and you really need forgiveness from that other person too. So these are all places where there is some sense of a need, where things that you've learned from wisdom talks can have some sort of input. Really, it's a whole talk in itself. But generally, there is a sense in which, probably starting with your anger towards someone else who has wronged you is probably the most clear example to look at. There are many people who say, well, if you let people off the hook, then it's just giving in. But I think the Buddhist teachings are that you can forgive without forgetting. And by doing that, you're doing yourself a favor. Because if you have to carry around constant anger for a person who has somehow wronged you in the past, it's actually damaging yourself. You're the one who suffers. Actually, the other person doesn't care either way. So you're burning the stomach ulcers or whatever as a result of not being able to let go of that anger which you have for the person, and you're the one who suffers because of that. The other person doesn't care either way. You know, you might dream of getting your own back someday or getting this really sort of fancy apology from them, but it may never happen. In the meantime, you suffer. So there's a sense in which by letting go of that emotion, you are doing yourself a favor. You are sort of making your life lighter as a result. Therefore, it's a good idea. even though it may be counterintuitive. And if you listen to many teachers on the web mostly, and there's a lot who tend to focus on this forgiveness aspect, many of them say what you're doing when you let go is you're making a space in your life for something better to grow. For as long as you're clinging on to some sort of remnant of anger for that person, it's like nothing can grow or progress in yourself. But by letting go of that, somehow it makes a space for something better to heal. Therefore, you're doing yourself a big favor. And that same principle can apply to forgiving yourself in order to be able to move past things. You're creating a space by which that can happen. For as long as you don't forgive yourself, it's like you're clinging onto something which will then never change. As for needing forgiveness from other people, okay, I think maybe it's not so clear, but sometimes we can relate to the fact that if we give forgiveness to other people, then other people are more likely to give it back to us as well, so that we can move past in that relationship to something bigger and more positive. So it is counterintuitive, but by having the courage to let go, we can grow as a result. And many negative emotions use the same principle, whether it's grief, whether it's, I don't know, a life-changing trauma, all of these things, it's the same principle. By giving it space, you can move past it. But for as long as you cling onto it, that space cannot occur. I think normally the most practical thing you can do is to practice loving kindness meditation, and simply allowing that positive feeling to spread beyond yourself. First, love yourself. You have to be able to do that first, and then spreading it beyond that. It somehow melts away the things that are the obstacles to compassion in your life in a way that it comes more naturally to you. Generally, the thing that impedes compassion is anger or inability to forgive. All the things that come as a result of parenting generally foster or need compassion. So probably for yourself all the things that come which are very hard to do as a parent. All those are sort of learning experiences or potential learning experiences for compassion. But where you get the compassion from, if you don't have that, I think you need to come back to the loving kindness practice and meditation, which is generally done at the end of a meditation when you already have something within you which you can then allow to grow and spread first to your whole self and then beyond yourself, whether it's light, whether it's a good feeling, or whether it's just a good intention for others. Today we didn't really do loving kindness particularly sort of clearly in a structured way, but often at the end of a meditation there will be a loving kindness meditation. If it doesn't, you can save it for the end of your practice. You can even do it at the beginning of the practice, and sometimes that helps the other meditation to go better as well.
Mm-hmm.
Let go of your attachments.
But it should be added that attachment to negative things should be let go of. But obviously, for John, his attachment to that person is bigger than his attachment to those niggling little things. So he has maintained that attachment, which is, I presume, a positive one. So those you leave in place. So don't just like get rid of all attachments. So you have to be selective. If it's one that's causing you stomach ulcers, then to be let go of.
My question is, how do we, my intention is to let go and forgive myself. But part of me thinks that I don't deserve to and that I should punish myself. So how do we physically let go and move on? Because my intention is there. And I'm very aware that it does have a physical effect. But I can't bring myself to actually let go. So how do I really shed and forgive myself?
I still recommend the loving kindness practice because it somehow sort of pulls out the little pegs that are still keeping you stuck in that. You know, to let those things drop away and to see yourself more objectively as other people might see you, perhaps. So you almost get that external perspective on yourself where you see yourself as you are rather than according to whatever expectation you've had in the past. And to count your blessings as well. There's a sense of gratitude, but even gratitude to yourself. Sometimes you need to look for that. Because we would tend to think that, just be grateful to other people, but there's many things that we ought to be grateful to ourselves for, and it's not just egotism. It's seeing the good in yourself and letting that take precedence, and realizing that we're 99% a good person, and maybe spend more time looking at that, not to kid ourselves that the 1% doesn't exist, but to celebrate that perhaps, so that we have the inspiration to deal with the other 1%. But having 38 blessings helps us to maybe see the things that we might have overlooked before, might not realized were a good aspect of ourselves, which we just took for granted before. And at the same time, to realize the danger of certain things, which may be small, but they might be blind spots for us otherwise.
I think we are not perfect. We have opportunity to make mistake. But I think I am so proud of you that you accept for what you did and then continue making good deeds and spreading love and kindness and everything that Prajan recommend you to do. And someday I will see your smile. Yeah. And please continue to come to study with the 38 blessing together. You okay? Any question, Kun Bob?
The nice thing about 38 blessings is that even if you only got one of the blessings, it leads to all the others.
Oh.
But if you have got none of them, then you need to find one, one redeeming feature of yourself.
Is that a physical attachment, or is that something that's happened in the past? Something that's happened to you personally from something in the past that you've got attachment to, you just can't let go of?
Yeah, the attachment part tends to be a mental aspect. So it's something which you cling on to mentally, or identify with, or you feel is an inextricable part of you. Mostly it's to do with the beliefs you have concerning that thing. Sometimes it can be something like an addiction too, when it does have a more physical aspect, where your whole body is going to sort of shake when you go into withdrawal or whatever. But generally, it's within Buddhism you're talking about when it's a more intellectual attachment to something, where it's just something you identify with, or you think that's you, whereas the real you might be something completely different. There's people who've got these sort of delusions of grandeur about themselves, for example, where that's who they think they are rather than who they really are. But if they could let go of that, then maybe they would be a lot happier with themselves, because they're not trying to live up to that expectation the whole time. But with things like, let's say, a drug addiction, then it's a mixture of the two. You need to sort out the physical addiction before you can start to work on the more subtle aspect of, the fact that you're tempted by these things.
Kun Terence, would you like to ask some question or sharing idea? Maybe the last one. Mm-hmm. Mm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, another 3 minutes left. Maybe the last question. So today, I think you you are very, very lucky to come and have some information from us. Very, very beneficial for us, especially you knowing that if you come to the temple and continue to study it, you will understand yourself more and more, and you will understand the purpose of life. No? And especially meditation will help you to do everything, to clear everything with the guidance of our Prajan here. So for tonight, I have to say thank you, Prajan, and we'll lead you all to pay respect to a teaching monk together. May we pay respect to our teaching monk by bowing 3 times. Bow, bow, bow. อาจารย์ให้พรไหมเจ้าคะ Okay. ให้พรได้ไหม Okay, could you please pay homage to the Lord Buddha by bowing 3 times? Bow, bow, bow. Sadhu. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Because of your, okay, we We usually to palm ups until our teaching monk leave the stage. Yeah. Could you please palm ups like that? Okay. Sadhu, sadhu.